Hello again, Ian Stuckey with Mastermind Games, back with the Eternal Flame from Malifaux. Tarnished Steel 09206. So the Eternal Flame is Karis' totem, and essentially a fire gammon, a lesser elemental construct encased in a construct's shell. Yeah, kind of weird construct and construct there, so doing some flame effects and playing around with shading and highlight on the steel here. You want a nice solid coat for your base coats. In terms of highlighting, I'm going to concern myself with the most readily visible surfaces. So I'm going to do the whole thing in the steel first and then pick out some details in other colors later. That's getting a nice solid coat of this first. And that's pretty good. Let that dry, move on in a bit. 09197 Old Bronze. And with this, I'm picking out this grate. Not concerned with touching the flames right now. Be picking those out later. I want to get these joints. And I think part of the head. How about here? That seems alright. So let's call that good. And that dries, I'll get some work done on some flames. Okay, matte white. This is an Army Painter Warpaint. Prepping some lighting, well, prepping for the fire here. The fire is going to be brighter than the rest of the model, so needs a little extra attention. If I don't get a completely solid coat, that's alright. This won't be done as a lighting effect, but the color of your primer is going to affect how the model turns out in general. Using black primer will result in darker colors overall, but you'll have trouble doing bright colors. And then using white will result in a lighter color scheme overall, but it'll look a little more cartoonish. Gray will mute and neutralize the colors. So it's just something to keep in mind. Your choice of primer does make a difference. Actually, a big difference. So a lot of these are spikes, but there's a few gouts of flame coming out of the 4 rear legs. The Eternal Flame does have hands, There isn't a whole lot about it other than its description in the rulebook. And again, I don't have the 3rd edition book yet, but in 2nd edition, it's not so much a construct controlled as it is a construct unleashed, and it views Karis as a bossy playmate and tries to push her to ever-increasing acts of pyromania. Okay. It's pretty good. Once that dries, I can get the base color. Or, well, now I'm going to do the eyes as a lighting effect, so do the base color on the flame once that dries. Okay. Phoenix Red 09005. So for the flames, there will be a base coat, 1 shade, and 2 highlights. Then at some point, one of these 4 colors will end up being a lighting effect going in the eye of the construct. This, however, is being done as a base coat, so you just want enough. You just want to keep your brush moist but not overly wet, and just enough water to thin out the paint. And you'll notice I am bracing my painting hand with the last few fingers of my offhand. It really helps on detail work, so bear that in mind. And I say put it that way because while I'm right-handed, not everyone is. So I am trying to teach myself to be ambidextrous. It's not an easy skill. That's what I'll call it. Do want a nice solid coat on these flames in particular. Base coats, you generally want to work from the lowest area in the model to the highest. Your shading, you're going to go from the high area to the low area, and your highlights low to high. Okay, and once that dries, one more there. Once that dries, the shading can begin. Well, I managed to forget a base coat, and that is Uniform Gray. This is a Warpaints color. Would help if I got the base. Just been a long week. But I can still start the shading once I've got this base coat down, so. Just being very careful where the limbs touch the ground. And the large amount of blank space underneath actually makes it more challenging, but I got it. Now your base coat's going to be the color you want. Your shade will be a darker value of the same color. In other words, a darker version. And your highlight a lighter value or a lighter version of your base coat. If you don't have a lot of paints, you can use black, white, and gray mixing to get the shades and highlights. Generally taking your base coat and mixing it with black will give you your shade, just a tiny amount of black though. Then mixing with white could give you your highlight, but more white than your color. But use just a tiny amount of the base coat color when you're mixing with white. If you want to mute a color, make it more dull and muted, then mix it with gray. Mixing with gray is called a tone, white a tint, and black a shade. Just throwing a bit of color theory there. Okay, I can still start shading. So that's going to be Fire Red 09004. I'm hearing funny noises I don't like. My computer's still been acting up. So, you gotta love it when your system automatically updates and the various updates start screwing with each other. So, thinning it out with 1 part paint to 1 part water. Just going over base coated area, letting the paint flow where it wants to go for the most part. Shading generally goes much quicker than the base coating. You do want some of your base coat showing through. Again, bracing my dominant hand with the fingers on my offhand. Dominant hand holds the brush, offhand holds the model. That's good for now. Let that dry. Alright, not completely dry, but dry enough to work with. 09196 aged pewter. Not too much of this. Just filling in these joints here. Make sure I'm actually recording and not dropping hundreds of frames a second again. Starting to get a little paranoid about that at this point. Not only because of how often it's been happening, but because of how random it is, where sometimes it doesn't happen. And then sometimes I suddenly blink and find I've dropped 2,000 frames. And then carefully, the edge of this grill that the flames behind the head are coming out of. Okay. Just 2 more shades and I can do some lighting effects and highlight detail. Alright. Let's see what this is doing here. Okay. Shading the steel now. However, instead of the typical, I'm using Scorched Metal 09125 to give it a hopefully burnt look. And this is plugged up, so paper clip down the nozzle to clear it. There we go. Sure, I'm getting back in focus. So I got my lid on. Thin out. This is kind of a metallic reddish brown. I'll go ahead and kind of do the underside here a bit first. Do need to use some caution so as not to hit the bronze I've previously done. Going in between the flames, avoiding the grill and the parts of the head that I'm keeping in bronze. I just get every section of the limbs carefully and individually right here. This will likely be the most meticulous portion of the shading I do. I have a tendency not to talk when I'm focused. It's just a habit of mine. Just bear with me while I wrap this up. I want to go ahead and finish the legs before I get its arms. Okay. Once that's dry, I can get the base. Alright, taking matte white again and prepping some lighting in the eyes. Or eye. I should be a little more specific. And then Stormy Gray 09088 to shade the basing with. Being careful not to touch any part of the actual model. Letting the paint flow. You'll notice I'm using the side of the brush. It's really saturated. Okay. Then I'm going to need to let that dry before I do the lighting. Alright. Fire Orange 09006. This will be the lighting effect for the eye. On lighting, you want okay, so one, this isn't mixed early enough, but you want 2 to 3 parts water per 1 part paint when doing a lighting effect. Just technically, I think it would be called a glaze, but just the most basic, or just the barest amount of pigment in the water. You want some of this white showing through. Just barely dotting that in. Alright. Once this is completely dry, so I can highlight, wrap up, and get this done. Okay, highlighting. Starting with Tarnished Brass at 09198. So I'm using a dry brushing technique here. No water. You also want a ragged feathered brush like this. And rub most of the paint out on a paper towel. And then lightly dust the area to be affected. This will burnish the surface. leaving the underlying area intact. True Silver 09207. Oh, I just realized I missed the grate, so let's just touch that up before I track where I've been. Now True Silver 09207. Switching brushes. You do want your brush completely dry for this. Concerning myself with the most readily visible surfaces only. So I won't be doing too much of the underside, just maybe a bit back there. And Fire Orange 09006. Yeah. And then some yellow 09008. Just plugged up. That was a little too far gone to keep using. Let's get that out of the way. Going even more quickly and lightly with the yellow than with the orange. Not bad. And Misty Gray 09090. Just need to find an appropriate brush here. Too much paint in it. And switching to a flathead brush. I use rounds for most of them. Pure Black 09037. this as a base coat, essentially. And I am just tidying up the perimeter. Being careful not to nick the basing I've done. This is just hand sculpted again. If you're using flock or talus, you would do this before applying that. Always clean out your brushes thoroughly. I have a cup of water off camera. And the Eternal Flame, Karis's totem. Continuing on with her henchman next. Until then, I am Ian Stuckey with Mastermind Games, signing out.